Chapter 7. Return of the Dune Lady. As soon as Elena signed off, he made the mirror disappear. Johnny placed his fist on both sides of his head and fell to his knees. He rocked forward and back a few times and threw back his head and howled, leaned forward and beat the rugs with his fist in his anger, fear, and frustration. It was the closest thing he had ever done, for as long as he could remember, to pitching a fit. He knew it was childish and stupid, but he couldn't help it. He found his sister, and she had put her baby in him. He had to admit to himself that he would do anything to keep his family safe, but this was extreme, even for him. Ling didn't chide him for his behavior. Skirts rustling, she came to him as he rocked and covered his face with his hands. She knelt by him, holding him until he could regain his composure. "What am I going to do?" Johnny moaned. "One step at a time," Ling said calmly. "How can you be so calm?" Johnny demanded. "Panic won't help you," Ling replied. Then she stood up and ordered, "Come, I have something to show you that might cheer you up." "Wait," Johnny said as he stood up. "How many people out there know that I'm pregnant?" "No one," Ling said reassuringly. "No one will if you don't want them to. I will make illusions that will hide the changes in your body. Though I recommend that you tell our family. Keeping secrets like this just isn't healthy." "All right, but no one else," Johnny said. "I don't want to be the butt of every joke in camp." When Johnny left the tent with Ling, no one commented on the racket he had been making. The tents were spelled to muffle conversational noise, but shouts always broke through the spell. He saw that they were camped out not far outside the temple rocks, a few yards away from the entrance. They were on trampled ground. Tents of every size and color were lined up in orderly rows. Each block contained a different tribe. People of all kinds: cattle, rats, dogs, camels, horses, asses, domestic birds, a few pampered domestic cats, and even a few dragons of one species or another populated the small tent city. Nomadic traders set up shop wherever they could find a clearing large enough to between the blocks. People bartered, played games, did chores, children played, animals sometimes vocalized, especially the dogs who liked to bark at a passerby. Ling's big gray Egyptian sighthound bounded up to them with his tail wagging and sloppy tongue lolling and a happy doggy grin. He was so tall that he nearly could look Ling in the eye standing on all fours. He had large, intelligent eyes, sharp, pointy ears that stood straight up, sleek fur except for around his muzzle and chin, looking like a funny gray beard and mustache. Lean, long-legged, with a deep chest and a thin whip-like tail with a fringe of pale gray hair that always reminded Johnny of a kind of flag. "Oof, oof, oof," barked the dog and Grady before licking Ling's jaw before she could stop him. "Yuck, sweetie!" Ling laughed as she pushed him off and removed a kerchief from her hidden pocket in her dress to wipe the drool from her face. Unrepentant, Sweetie sat down and continued to grin and wag his flag-like tail, sweeping up puffs of dirt with it. Johnny smiled at the spoiled dog and rubbed his head. "Hello, dog." Sweetie stood and wiggled all over from the attention and said, "Hello." Johnny laughed. Sweetie was just a dog, but he had learned to mimic a few words and short phrases much the same way parrots do, though he expected the dog was smart enough to get the gist of what he was saying. They walked next door to Ling's tent. It wasn't the biggest, but it was the best appointed of the entire block, and it had the most brightly colored riot of hues than any other. Sweetie went to his water bowl under an eave, supported by a pair of tent posts at one end, and attached to the tent at the other. Under the shade it provided, he sought water from his ever-full and clean dish. Ling always made sure her animals' water vessels were charmed to stay that way. To the side of her tent, an awning was set up for several camels and 2 Arabian horses. The rest of Johnny's family, Isaac, Echo, and Noah, were busy currying them. Noah was the only one with a rat in sight. The other 4 had likely curled up for a nap inside Ling's tent. Noah's black rat was named Ben, and he was a little larger than Goldie. Noah favored his father in his appearance, with the longest features and light black hair. He did have the Asian eyes, his features further softened by the inheriting of his mother's full lips. Noah didn't get his father's height. He was only 1 inch taller than his mom. He wore the traditional garb in the more casual style than Johnny's present attire. His clothes were mostly off-white, with the outer robes striped with earthy reds and tied with a black belt. Eiko resembled her mother in looks, but not as round-faced as Ling, however, and she had her father's height. At nearly 7 feet tall, she was one of the few women that could look Johnny directly in the eyes without craning her neck. She wore a dress similar to her mother's, only hers was deep red. Johnny's father, Isaac, was long and lean, with a kindly, weather-beaten face. His long, light black hair was streaked heavily with gray. He was 59 years old, and looked it because he was not a practitioner of magic. He had no interest in using magic himself, though Ling insisted that he had the knack if he would only apply himself. Isaac didn't wear the usual loose garb most of his clan wore. Instead, he wore black cotton pants, thong sandals, and a white tunic. His long braid was allowed to hang down his back where it had grown halfway down his calves. Johnny asked Ling after a quicker look around, "Where are little girl and Goldie?" "They're visiting with Bronwyn and Steve," Ling reassured him. "They will come back in a little while." His family stopped looking after the beasts, putting down their grooming tools on a small workbench. They looked to be nearly finished anyway, and came to greet Johnny. "Are you all right?" Isaac asked in concern as he grasped Johnny's shoulder. "What happened to you?" Bracing himself and remembering Ling's advice, Johnny told the whole story. When it came to the last part, about finding his sister and what she had done to him to save her son, they didn't know whether to laugh, be angry with Elena, or just be sympathetic with Johnny's plight, so they did a combination of all three. Snorting and trying not to laugh, Aiko hugged him and said, "It's really awful what she did to you. I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, Johnny. I can't help it. Men just don't get what it's like to be female. Women sometimes want men to go through what they do so they can understand us. It's like a female jock on all men born of frustrated communication." "It's all right," Johnny said with a lopsided smile. "I can almost understand why you think this is funny." "Shall I avenge you?" Noah asked. He didn't laugh outright, but Johnny could see it in his eyes. He was serious about the offer, though. It was tempting. Noah was every bit as good a practitioner in magic as his mother. Elena had meant no harm. Johnny knew her well enough to know that she was not lying to him when she said she was trying to do her best for her son and the country she served. Johnny's opinion about his loyalties had not changed, but it were up to him to make a choice. Elena as regent and her son as the new king would definitely be a better option than Richard on the throne. "No," Johnny said with a grateful clap on the shorter man's shoulder. "But you could do us all a favor by getting a message out that we have unanimously refused to help Elena as she requested." "You actually want to help her?" Noah replied incredulously. "I'm still considering that," Johnny replied as he seriously began to weigh the pros and cons of assisting his baby sister. "For now, I just want Richard to stop hunting me." Noah nodded. "Done. I will write the message and arrange for the messenger to be caught by it long enough for Richard to get it." "The messenger will have to be a professional escape artist," Johnny warned. "Once he's caught, the guards might not let him go." "Ben can do it," Noah said confidently as he picked up his fat black rat and petted his head. "What do you think? Are you willing to give it a try?" "It would be more convincing if the messenger were human. Ben won't do," Johnny suggested. "I will do just fine when Noah transforms me into a man," Ben replied in his squeaky voice as he turned to look at Johnny. "He's done it before. It's strange, but not painful. He can make the spell wear off once I lose the letter, and I can teleport back to safety once I'm a rat again." Noah smiled mischievously. "I suppose that will have to do if you're willing." Johnny shrugged. "I'm willing," Ben affirmed. Then Noah said, "Mom and I teleported the Dune lady back, plus most of the cargo and all your possessions. We set mending spells on everything. She'll be better than new in a few days. Mom and I have decided to place a few handy improvements." "Where?" Johnny exclaimed in excitement. "It's in the parking lot," Ling said. They headed west towards the outer edge of the camp. The parking lot was a designated communal area where everyone brought their carts, sand chips, trucks, and floating wagons, animal-drawn wagons with no wheels and anti-gravity spells, so they could deal with the going over uneven or sandy ground better. The outermost edge of the lot, furthest away from the tent city, was the hulk of the Dune lady. The closer he and his family walked towards the ship, the more they could see the damage. The worst was a big hole in the main engine contained under the ship's living quarters. Johnny expected more paint and structural damage than the little scratches and dents he saw scraped on the bottom of the ship, but the protection spells that warded against rock and weather damages had partially prevented that. The last section had nearly torn off, but as Johnny watched, it was slowly pulling itself back together again. The bullet holes were shrinking away, and they could all hear the sound of popping metal as things inside righted themselves. His remaining cargo lay in neat piles next to his ship, ready to be reloaded when the ship's repairs were done. Johnny was pleased to see so much had been retrieved, though he noticed that all the perishables were missing. He made a mental shrug. It was likely they had been inspected and distributed to the clan if any of it was still edible. Fresh food didn't last long in the desert without proper storage either by refrigeration or stasis spells. The guards had opened everything, breaking seals and protective spells on the boxes and crates. Johnny wouldn't have been surprised if most of his foodstuffs were in ruin by the time they had been teleported back. "I really thought I lost her," Johnny said gratefully as he shook his head. "I should have known better." "Naturally, we don't want you to lose your business," Lee replied. She added, "Noah and I are going to place a green ward on the hull of your ship. If it gets shot at again, it won't be damaged. And we upgraded the regeneration and illusion spells. The old ones were wearing out." "We got the idea of the green ward from your royal pain-in-the-butt sister," Noah said. "Thanks," Johnny replied simply with complete sincerity. "There you are!" Steve's voice rang out cheerily from behind them. There was Steve, 10 years older and still looking fit. He had quit the gladiator circuit 5 years after he had won his fight with Johnny's bet. He hadn't lost a fight since. But he grew weary of fighting and then decided to join the Dragon Clan and settle down with a good woman. He had other talents to draw upon that he could earn a living with. No one would have guessed it, but he was a remarkable cook. He now owned a small traveling restaurant he operated out of his own sand ship. He traveled with nomadic tribes bartering for foodstuffs and various traders and turned them into heavenly dishes people came from far and wide to sample. He had a wife and 2 children that helped him run his business and several rats to keep his kitchen vermin-free. Keeping strict cleaning practices, no one ever got food poisoning from his kitchen. Riding on his shoulders in loose indigo pants, sandals, and a white tunic was the little girl in full human form, happily sucking on a lollipop half the diameter of her head. Knowing the cook who made the confection, namely Steve, it was likely a candied goose liver, a favorite of many dragons and some humans, oddly enough. Goldie was at his heels to his right, and to his left was Bronwyn, still both happily licking their chops from whatever Steve had been feeding them. Johnny smelled heavily spiced goat meat wafting off at them when the wind shifted. He smiled and said, "Steve, you got my kid to wear clothes." "I said I would let her ride me if she put them on," Steve laughed. "I couldn't have her bare bum sitting on my shoulders." "I am Little Girl the Dragon," Little Girl giggled as she paused from sucking on her enormous candy pop, happily bouncing on Steve's shoulders a little. "Human rider of the Dragon Clan." "Yep," Steve smiled affectionately up at her. Then he knelt and gently lifted her off his shoulders, placing her firmly on the ground before standing. "But I only promised to carry you back to your father. You're getting a big little girl. It won't be much longer before you can start carrying me for a change." Little Girl turned to look adoringly up at him. He winked and gently ruffled her hair a bit. Little Girl smiled radiantly at Steve. To her he was like a favorite uncle, who she loved very much. There was an element of hero worship in her heart for the ex-gladiator. Johnny had told her what he had done for her when she was a hatchling, and she never forgot it. Steve had loved and adored her as well. He felt that she played a major role in his much-blessed life. Ever since that one selfless act, good fortune seemed to follow him. He was forever grateful to both the goddess and to Little Girl for that. "So," Steve said, "I hear you've been getting into quite a bit of trouble lately." Johnny sighed as Bronwyn extended her nose towards him, sniffing and cocking her head in confusion. The wind had shifted again. Now Little Girl and Goldie smelled the changes in Johnny's body, too. With a mental shrug, he told the rest of his family, Johnny thought Steve, Bronwyn, and Goldie his family, too, about his awkward condition and how he got that way. "You're joking, right?" Steve said, looking totally surprised and half disbelieving after Johnny finished recounting his story. "Have you somehow lost your mind?" "He smells like it," Bronwyn confirmed. "I was confused at first. His body was giving off odors only women should be giving off when there was child. Now it makes sense." "How can you have a baby?" Little Girl asked as she furrowed her brow in confusion. "You don't have the parts. I read the books on biology you gave me." "I'll explain that to you later," Johnny promised. He had no desire to tell everyone the exact details of how his anatomy was rearranged. It was more information than most of them wanted, and it was embarrassing. "Well, Mr. Mom," Steve said, taken aback, "I'm here for you if you need me." "Shall I find Ellen a biter for you?" Goldie offered. "No, please don't do that," Johnny pleaded. "And thanks, Steve, but I'm all right." Steve shrugged, thinking to himself that Johnny was the toughest man he knew to suffer this indignity and act so calm and collected. He would just curl up in a ball and cry if he found out he was pregnant, and he rarely cried. He was a pretty tough guy himself. Johnny, however, was burying his unease for the time being. Part of him still felt like screaming. He had long grown used to hiding his feelings until he had the time and privacy enough to deal with them. So he smiled and changed the subject. "I got my sand ship back. Mom and Noah are repairing it." Then, after a moment's thought, he turned to Ling and asked, "You know where I hide my money. Did the guards find it?" Ling replied, "They never found it. You got quite a hoard in there. What are you planning to do with it?" "Not much. It's just that business can be slow sometimes, and it's nice to have a financial cushion to fall back on," Johnny replied with a non-committal shrug. He had stashed his gold coin and other tradable valuables in a secret compartment inside his medicine cabinet. It would only open with the correct series of touches and a password only he and Ling knew. He didn't know how long he was going to be a cargo runner, so he saved what he didn't spend for lean times and as a retirement fund.